When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, one of its earliest and most aggressive thrusts fell upon the key region of Donetsk, where Russian forces stormed deep into Ukrainian territory and managed to seize large swaths of land before Kyiv could mount an organized counteroffensive. Despite numerous Ukrainian pushbacks, Russia has managed to hold the majority of this region for much of the war and has continued to grind forward, albeit slowly, methodically, and with staggering human cost. Ukraine cannot allow Russia to consolidate this occupation or convert it into a bargaining chip for future negotiations, and in mid-November 2025, Kyiv delivered a response that Moscow did not expect. It turned its drones inward, striking deep into its own Russian-occupied territory in Donetsk and plunging the occupiers into darkness. In a deliberate, calculated move, Ukraine cut power to large parts of Donetsk, sending an unmistakable message that it is prepared to bring the battle over energy infrastructure directly onto ground it considers its own, even if that means damaging facilities it built decades ago. The first signs of this shock operation emerged during the early hours of November 18th, when several occupied cities across Donetsk saw sudden, widespread power outages. Within hours, Euromaidan press confirmed why. Ukraine had launched a coordinated drone strike against two major thermal power plants long under Russian occupation, Starobeshevska and Zuevskaya, both essential to generating electricity and heating for Russian troops and administrators in the region. Both plants were set ablaze by precision kamikaze drones. While information from Starobeshevska remained sparse, the Zuevskaya attack was captured on video and quickly spread across Telegram. A short 15-second clip filmed from what appeared to be an apartment window showed thick flames rising from the direction of the power station. Another recording, also published by Excelenova Plus, seemed to catch the strike in progress, with the telltale buzzing of drones and the frantic bursts of Russian air defenses lighting the night sky. According to Euromaidan press, the Ukrainian drones managed a direct hit on a transformer attached to Zuevskaya's second boiler, knocking it out of service entirely. The cascading effect from that single destroyed transformer rippled through the power grid, plunging large parts of Donetsk into blackout conditions. RBC Ukraine added key details. Zuevskaya is located in the city of Zugrez and has a production capacity of around 1,200 megawatts, enough to power roughly a third of all Russian-occupied territory in Donetsk. Starobeshevska is even larger, with a maximum capacity of over 2,300 megawatts, and Russia has relied on it heavily to stabilize its energy systems across the occupied region. On the surface, Ukraine's decision to strike facilities that technically belong to Ukraine might appear counterintuitive, but these plants have been out of Ukrainian control for years, seized during the earlier stages of Russia's occupation, and repurposed to support the invading army. From Kyiv's perspective, these plants are no longer Ukrainian, they are Russian military assets, and disabling them weakens Russian combat operations more than it harms Ukraine. The plants can be rebuilt later. What Ukraine cannot do is allow Russia to use them indefinitely as logistical fortresses in an area where Moscow seeks full annexation. Ukraine has not officially taken responsibility for the attack, so the bulk of available information comes from local reports compiled by Euromaidan press. The outlet notes that blackout reports first surfaced in the occupied city of Donetsk itself, then rapidly spread to Makivka and Ilovaisk, which lost power completely. The outages began around 30 minutes after social media users reported the presence of Ukrainian drones overhead. Flickering lights were observed after the Zuevskaya strike, but full blackouts only began after Starobeshevska was hit. Curiously, more detailed information has emerged from Russian sources than Ukrainian ones. The Moscow Times reported that Denis Pushilin, the Kremlin-installed leader of the occupied section of Donetsk, posted a telegram announcement describing the blackouts and outlining which districts had been affected. He called the drone attack unprecedented and admitted that both thermal plants had suffered severe damage. He acknowledged that numerous boiler houses and filtration stations had shut down as a result, causing widespread disruptions. In a follow-up post, Pushilin gave numbers that revealed how extensive the blackout had become. At the moment, 65% of consumers are without electricity, he said, adding that rolling blackouts were now inevitable. DNR News, another Russian-aligned outlet, published even more data, stating that both power plants were fully shut down. No partial operation remained. Their shutdown affected 2,399 transformer substations, 44 educational institutions, 66 boiler houses, 14 medical facilities, and more than 376,000 individual customers. In other words, Ukraine hit exactly what it aimed at, and the consequences were massive. The obvious question is, why would Ukraine destroy its own infrastructure? And the answer lies in Russia's shift in strategy. Since autumn 2025, Moscow has intensified its campaign of infrastructure strikes, specifically targeting Ukraine's energy grid with the goal of freezing Ukrainians into submission during winter. Rather than focusing on military targets, Russia has repeatedly hit civilian heating, electrical stations, and distribution lines. Its objective is strategic terror to plunge Ukraine into cold darkness and infrastructural paralysis, and in 2025, Russia escalated these strikes far beyond previous years in an attempt to gain leverage before potential negotiations. One of the most severe Russian attacks took place on November 8th when Russia launched hundreds of drones, along with waves of cruise and ballistic missiles, toward Ukrainian energy facilities. Ukraine shot down 406 out of 458 incoming Shahed drones and decoys, but it intercepted only 9 out of 45 missiles. Energy Minister Svitlana Hrinchuk called it one of the largest ballistic strikes on energy infrastructure since the war began. The Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine's energy sector has become trapped in a Russian-imposed doom loop, a cycle of destroy, fix, repeat. Russia hits a plant, Ukraine repairs it. Russia hits it again, costing Ukraine enormous resources and overwhelming its fragmented Soviet-era infrastructure. Ukraine's donors have supplied more than $1.16 billion in replacement equipment, but the country's energy sector has burned through hundreds of millions in emergency repairs. Meanwhile, Russia has expanded its targeting to Ukraine's domestic gas production, wiping out 60% of it through strikes in early October alone. This is why Ukraine is now targeting Russian energy assets, including those located on Ukrainian territory but controlled by Russia. On November 17th, Novaya Gazeta reported that Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia's energy sector had caused a 34% increase in Russian power outages in 2025 compared to all of 2024. From January to October 2025, Russia experienced more than 4,198 outages, many of which it blames on weather or maintenance, but which Ukraine's strike patterns reveal are part of a silent, escalating energy war. This brings the focus back to Donetsk. By cutting power in occupied Donetsk, Ukraine did not merely inconvenience Russian soldiers. It crippled command centers, heating facilities, logistics routes, fuel storage, drone control hubs, and surveillance outposts. Donetsk was already approaching the coldest part of the year, with temperatures falling into the mid-40s Fahrenheit, and these blackouts create extremely difficult conditions for Russian units tasked with launching late autumn offensives. As RBC Ukraine notes, Ukraine's broader campaign, striking Donetsk's energy grid while also hitting oil refineries inside Russia, aims to disrupt Russian offensive capability at the precise moment Putin is ordering his forces to attempt breakthroughs around Pokrovsk and other fronts. Russia needs Donetsk fully under its control to strengthen its peace talk leverage. Ukraine cannot allow that. By knocking out Starobeshevska and Zuevskaya, Kyiv not only plunged occupiers into cold, dark conditions, but also struck the logistical backbone supporting Russia's grinding push. Pokrovsk, Ukraine's most crucial logistical hub in Donetsk, has been under Russian assault for 18 months, costing Moscow more than 100,000 casualties without delivering a decisive breakthrough. Ukraine hopes that crippling Russian energy infrastructure in Donetsk will further slow these offensives, reduce Russian combat efficiency, and limit Moscow's ability to project power across the region. President Zelensky made Ukraine's strategy clear back in October, warning that if Russia continues to strike Ukraine's grid, Ukraine will strike back at Russian infrastructure precisely, selectively, and without targeting civilians. The November 18th operation may signal that Kyiv is expanding this policy to include occupied regions as well. Russia uses Donetsk as a launch pad for drones, glide bombs, and missile attacks into the heart of Ukraine. Disabling power in that region may hinder these operations as much as it hinders Russian troop movements. Ultimately, Ukraine has demonstrated to Putin that it is willing to hit itself where it hurts if doing so inflicts greater pain on the occupier. In doing so, Kyiv has flipped Russia's energy warfare doctrine on its head. While Putin continues sacrificing his own soldiers and infrastructure in pursuit of territorial gains, Ukraine has shown it is willing to make cold, hard strategic decisions to ensure Russia pays a higher price. And in occupied Donetsk, that price is now being felt in darkness, cold, and faltering Russian operations.